Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Helen Allen. I'm the executive director of the Winter Show. We're thrilled to have you with us today, and we are thrilled to be welcoming our distinguished guests. The Winter Show is owned by and benefits a wonderful New York organization called East Side House Settlement, an organization that's been running in New York since 1891. We transform lives through workforce development and through education initiatives. So everyone's presence here today truly helps New Yorkers in need, and we are very grateful to you for that. So I just want to thank Bank of America for their generous support in helping us put on this exhibition and this talk, and our dear friends at John Jay Homestead, who've been tremendous in getting this panel together and in producing this marvelous film. So without further ado, I'm going to show you a short film about the restoration of the John Jay Homestead, and then Ellen will begin our discussion.
John Jay was one of the founding fathers of the United States. He worked with and for George Washington. He is one of the writers of the Federalist Papers. He was a very important man during the time of independence. John Jay did live right down the street from where I live. I live on a corner called Cantito Corner in Bedford, New York. And he retired to a beautiful rustic farmhouse right down the road. It is a beautiful piece of property, but it is in disrepair. I am so excited that the John Jay project is underway. You learn an awful lot of history from examining and working on the restoration of an old property.
There is a land of pure delight where saints immortal reign.
I think the project really reveals to Americans the importance of one of the founders of this country who deserves to be among the founders of the first rank. It was no coincidence that when they were looking for a Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, they chose Jay because of his role in writing the Constitution of New York, and also because of Jay's role in eliminating slavery in New York beginning in 1799 when he became governor.
Maybe he needs a musical made about him on Broadway.
That would help a lot. Look what it did for Hamilton.
It's an amazing history. And now, with the restoration, it's going to be a showpiece and an attraction and a place where especially school children can come and learn about the history and actually be in the place where the history happened.
The planned investment at Jay in its totality will be the largest single investment in a historic site renovation in our agency's history. The centerpiece is Bedford House. It's a house he designed. Every room in this house tells a story, and it's not just the house itself, it's the wall finishes, it's the paintings, it's the candlesticks, all of the objects that we will be curating there.
I think what is so interesting about a house like Bedford House, too, is it's a manifestation of Jay. He was often up before the sun and out on horseback before breakfast. And what is he thinking about as he's riding around that farm? And that's what I always find it interesting. What are the founding fathers thinking about?
This is the time in America when early American gardens were being created. If you go to places like Williamsburg, you'll see beautiful, historically correct gardens. And I hope that we can do some of that kind of beautification of the land itself around the house. It is a wonderful way to learn history.
History is a basic need because it gives us more perspective. How do you end a war? How do you design a government from scratch? These are all things that these people thought about in their moment. they also had to find common ground with people with whom they had the most fundamental disagreements. That's something that we could all learn how to do better ourselves.
History now is changing. People are rewriting it. So it's important to have structures and institutions that people cannot destroy.
I invite each and every one of you to become one of the friends of the John Jay Homestead. You help the preservation, you help the restoration, and you help the extension of American history. We are so excited about this project, and we hope you can become excited also.
There is a land of pure delight where saints immortal reign. In finite day excludes the night, not joy and spring nor death's cold flood should fright us from that shore.
I've done my share of introductions, but Friends of John Jay, that was next level, as a way of teeing up the topic that we're going to do. As Helen said, I am Ellen McGauley. I am the executive editor at Veranda, and I'm here because preservation is a cornerstone of our editorial mission. It kind of sets us apart as a design publication. Late last year, we had the great honor of being recognized by the National Trust as a transformative organization. This is part of why we're at the Winter Show and part of this discussion. Such a great honor and so meaningful that I'm not going to waste a minute. We are here today to talk about why preservation of historic American buildings matters. To do this, we are going to get insight from two people who are applying their gifts, their voices, their wisdom of experience to point us forward. First is not just the homestead's most famous neighbor, but someone who shares a love of the land and cultivating it and sustaining herself on it. She is a leading voice for the homestead's restoration. She is the chair of the Landscape Committee, an American icon who has been leading by example for decades. And if you're like me and have listened to her in past panel discussions, documentaries, you know she is a storyteller of the highest order. Please welcome Martha Stewart. Next to her, we have a gentleman who introduced himself to me as no great preservationist and no decorative arts genius.
Can leave.
And I love a self-described imposter. They tend to arrive with such great surprises and wisdom. In positions like his current post, president of the Richard Hampton Jenrette Foundation, and past as the executive director of the American Institute of Architects, assistant dean at Harvard's Graduate School of Design, he has built a career on getting the right people into a conversation, on crystallizing the message. No fluffy talk, we all can recognize that a mile away. He's the guy that stakeholders call when they want to think long-term and bigger, and in ways that create change and a pivot point. Right now, he and the foundation are out to transform the way we approach our most valuable properties and create investment from the next generation. Please welcome Ben Prosky. Okay, Martha, I'm going to start with you. Just a bit of background, kind of leading up to where we are today. As a neighbor of the 62-acre property, can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with it and sort of its importance to your eye?
Well, I do live right up the street. I live where supposedly Chief Katona lived, and I live on Cantato Corners where his girlfriend, Princess Cantato, was supposedly living. I love to romanticize because I always say I'm looking for my Cantato, even though I'm living there. But I bought an old rundown farm. The oldest house is 1776 on the property, which has been restored, not appropriately. It could never stand up to the scrutiny of New York State as a landmark. but it's a beautiful property, and I didn't even know about that property that I bought when I first discovered the John Jay house. I spent weekends up in Bedford at my sister-in-law's house right after I got married in 1961, and spent many, many pleasant weekends roaming around the John Jay property. And little did I know that it was going to be in my life. I had no idea that I would be participating in something so exciting as the restoration. I've restored a lot of old houses. I started with a little 1805 farmhouse in Middlefield, Massachusetts. No heat, no electricity. We made it into a charming place with a Williamsburg garden outside. I visited as a child. I visited, and as a young married person, I visited every single restored property, a historic site that I could find. I just love to look at it. The Mission House in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. Of course, Williamsburg. I took my daughter and all her friends for their 10th birthday down to Williamsburg. We went horseback riding all around the Virginia hills. We had so much fun. So it's just, and all the Hudson River houses, I visited every single one of those. So it's important for me. That's how I do learn history. And that film almost made me cry, because what Linda said about how history is being changed, it's being altered. It can't be altered if you have the house there to look at with everything in it that was in it when it was lived in by the person who made it a difference in American history. It's very wonderful to learn history that way. And I like landscape now even more than I like restoration of houses, architectural restoration, which I'm still very interested in. But it's the landscape of the John Jay house is just sitting there waiting to be recreated the way John Jay would have liked it.
Well, that tees up my next follow-up question on that is that, do you see the kinship that maybe the rest of us see between the way he related to his land and the way he cared for it? Because this wasn't just a property that he retreated to, he actively managed everything about it, from crop rotations
we
to
would
everything.
have gotten along fabulous.
I think so. Talk about neighbors. Yeah.
I would have liked him, and he would have liked me. Yes. We would have been milking our cows together. But really and truly, it's just such a pleasant way to live. I mean, I could stay in New York overnight, but I never do. I go home because I have my horses, I have my chickens, I have my donkeys, I have the rest of the livestock. I think I have like 300 animals that I go home to. And
they're waiting for you every night. They know you're coming.
And the gardens and the tree planting and the whole thing. And I'm sure John Jay found great solace in that, because he had a very tough life. His life was not an easy life. It was a beautiful life. He did amazing things, working with amazing people. But that was not an easy life in those days. And you can tell, I mean, but the healthiest way to live, and he lived very, very well, was from the land.
Well, I thought that was very interesting too. He believed agriculture fostered independence, discipline, and civic virtue. Do you see those values as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's just part of the way one lives on a farm.
Yeah. Ben, let's talk about the relationship between the Homestead and the Richard Hampton Jenrette Foundation. He was a dedicated preservationist, along with being quite successful in business. And a lot of what you're looking to is the next generation, advancing innovation, education, stewardship. Your involvement with the Homestead started, I thought, with a portrait, but I believe you said before that.
Yeah, well, actually, maybe she's in this room. I'm going to do a shout out to Anna Kenoff. Anna is someone I knew when she was a really bright architecture student at Columbia when I worked there. Years later, we all find ourselves in different places, and she said, Ben, you've left the contemporary architecture world and you're in with these old houses. All I can offer is I live near this homestead, and there's this wonderful people there, Caroline and everyone who you should meet. So we had lunch and we met, And then we just discovered, like peeling the onion, there were so many wonderful connections. We looked at a wall where a portrait of Jefferson used to hang, which was purchased by John Jay's son, but that Dick Jenrette bought many, many years later, and that we have. And so it sort of started, well, this restoration and so on, and we might start loading part of the collection. Maybe we can do that. But then, the connections really between those families are extraordinary. John Jay married a Livingston. Dick Jenrette bought Edgewater, which is a Livingston house, the Livingstons of New York State, not the New Jersey Livingstons, but they're all cousins. We have at Edgewater, the house in the Hudson Valley, a bust of John Jay, which has been sold with the house for several generations. Gore Vidal lived in there with that bust in the house before Dick Jenrette, and we think it goes back to John Jay's great-grandson who lived at Edgewater, Dick Jenrette's house, and must have installed it there. So we could make these connections over and over again, but it's why these old places matter, right? Because you start to see them and knit together these stories.
Yeah, and the stories continue when all of these collections kind of move around and are still alive. Yeah. Now, Dick Jenrette was a friend of yours as well, right, Martha?
Oh, yes, I visited every one of his homes. He had first been a client when I was a stockbroker. Donaldson Lufkin.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
They were big buyers of our recommended stocks at the time. And then I was so enamored that he was buying up these most beautiful homes and restoring them and it's such a beautiful fashion and then furnishing them. And I think I visited all of them. It was incredible to see the collections, to see the amazing furniture. It did really inform me a lot about federal furniture, which I happen to like very much, and his mirror collection. I was just so envious of it, But he was quite something. And then his wonderful, is it Milton, the plantation?
Oh, Milford, yes, in South Carolina.
I went one year during the Derby, and I made him mint juleps, which he loved, and we had quite a good time watching the races, but those houses incredible, and he was really interested in it. He and his partner Bill Thompson did an amazing job at filling those houses with appropriate and well documented antiques and beautiful decorative arts. It was great.
But we heard that. We knew that Dick liked to party in those houses. And like Milford especially goes far away. I mean, did he get fun?
Yeah, he really had fun, and I went to some parties in Charleston too.
Yeah,
I had friends down there that I visited, and he was always entertaining.
Ben, can you bring us into some of his parties? And this is a academic question, because what happens in these houses is part of their story and their storytelling, and why they're worthy of.
Dick was a consummate host and a gentleman. I mean, maybe there's someone in this room who has something bad to say. I've yet to find someone who can say, and that's saying a lot for someone who is a New York City, investment bank or founder of a bank. And he always showed graciousness and loved to host. I mean, he was a Southerner, so he brought some of that. But yeah, people loved to stay at Dick's properties, and we have pipe dreams of recreating one party that is kind of legendary at Edgewater, which is just on the Hudson River up in Rhinebeck. And the thing about Edgewater, which detracts for some people, is that it was built before the train line, and the train line literally runs feet from the back of the house. But, and Dick did beautiful things to landscape, but the train does go by, and it's a bit surprising. Well, he harnessed that when DLJ was celebrating, I think it was their 35th anniversary, and he chartered a private train from Grand Central Station that took, I think it was something like 450 guests. They got there for cocktail hour. The train stopped at Edgewater. It made an unscheduled stop because it was a private train. They all got off. It went up to Albany, turned around, came back at like 10-something at night and brought everyone back by midnight to go to bed back home. I mean, amazing. And there were tents and there was food. There was even china designed and executed by Tiffany's. And so, I mean, just the details, the graciousness, I think everyone probably felt that Dick welcomed them personally, right? I mean, he just had a warmth to it.
I lived by a train track, but nobody ever else got off that train to party at our place in Florida. Martha, I'd like to turn to the gardens at the homestead. As you were speaking, I think everyone in here could feel the passion of your gardening and the idea of transforming just the land into this, again, part of your sustenance. And in the film, you referenced following the traditions of early American gardens and Williamsburg. Is that kind of your vision for the gardens there?
Well, I don't think we're going to do too many very formal parterre gardens there. It was really more of a farm. The view is all important. And even though there's a highway, Route 22 goes right down in front of the house, you can sort of block out that with some more lovely plantings and create a rolling hills. There should be a ha-ha there. I think there was originally a ha-ha. If you don't know what that is, it's kind of a ditch that it goes, your land goes this way, and then it goes way down like this, and then straight up, so that the cows on this side can never get over to here. So the front lawn of the house can be completely protected without any fencing or bushes or shrubberies or anything.
I didn't know that was the purpose of it.
Because when you get up and when you're in the house and you walk over to the edge, you say, aha. That's how the ha-ha got its name, because otherwise you fall down 8 feet into a ditch. So and it's a brick wall holding up the straight edge. So that's what I hope we can do. And I'm already working with lots of the local tree people, the select horticultures, the hard scrabbles, all these people who deal in really beautiful trees. And so maybe we'll be even able to get large trees planted in alleys and things that will beautify the property.
And you're working with local garden clubs as well. Did I hear that some of them are taking different...
chomping at the bit, trying to get our hands on that land and make something really amazing of it.
Well, when I heard about the different local garden clubs that are involved and working with you on that, I just had this picture of how you would start your, it just had this sort of like skin in the game, everybody get in here, get in the dirt and get it done. And I thought that's the only way you've ever done it, right? Yes.
Absolutely. So I think we're all anxious to really get the whole thing underway. And we have funding from the state. The state has been extremely generous in their funding. We're very excited about that. We also have some very good plans for the restoration of the house. And now we have, it's a big project. It's a large project, and when you're dealing with New York State, with a entity like that, who's giving a lot of money, you have a lot of answers, a lot of people to answer to. So everything has to be done in a very proper fashion, and not like me restoring the Adams House in Westport and writing a little book about it for. It's called the New Old House. It's not that easy. It's much, much more difficult to process, but it's doable. And I think it's going to be resulting in something very valuable, not only for the neighborhood, but for America in general. We have to keep our real history alive and understandable. We have to know what these people really did for this country and protect it.
And there's something so beautiful about the community coming together in different ways. And Ben, I wanted to ask you about that. What it reminded me of was something Ben told me about Hillsborough, the house in Hillsborough, Dick Jenrette's house in Hillsborough. Can you talk about how the community kind of comes together to clean up? And
well, I think what's so important, Martha, what you're mentioning and what you're doing is that you're not just going with someone high end and doing it and then saying to the community, here, come enjoy it, right? You're helping them be a part of it, because I hate to say it, there will be a day with extreme weather events and things that you might need that community to come help you, and they will be there because you've involved them. And I think that's so smart. We had a recent issue. There's storms all the time. It's hard to remember when they were, but earlier in the year in North Carolina. And Dick Jenrette, when he owned Airmount, which is the house in Hillsborough, North Carolina, and sometimes stayed there, but kept it mostly open to the public, he recreated something on that property that was next to his house in the Hudson Valley called the Poets Walk. Now, he didn't own the Poets Walk in the Hudson Valley, but he loved the idea of it, and it's a walk that just is open to the public. He created one in Hillsborough to really just invite whoever wants to onto the property to walk, right? I think it's so important that we make these connections with whatever your point of entry is, maybe some people never go into the house. They just love the land. They want to walk on it, and you have to create that. So he did that, and now, for decades, the community walks there and comes there. And earlier this year, when the river that's nearby at the bottom of the hill, crested and flooded so much of the Poets Walk, and there was tons of debris, and we were talking about how we were going to put this back together, community members came out and offered help and organized, and they pulled trees and shrubberies and things that had all been, blocking everything to restore the path that they loved and the property they loved. So I think it's just so important, and it comes back to you in spades. Well, only with spades. When you need it, when you involve a community in these places.
Because there's times when there is government money and there's times when there's not. And so the houses have to live through all of that. And Ben, one thing that's been really impressive to me about how you've kind of thought about getting us closer to these properties in different ways to discover. It reminded me of how, the way we started, I didn't realize that you used to walk the property of the John Jay Homestead before you even knew you would be a neighbor, right?
Lots of coincidences, and it's lovely. And there another odd coincidence was I was at an auction, and I'd been in the house, and I saw the dining room chairs, and then all of a sudden there were 16 more of the identical Sheraton chairs at Sotheby's, the old Sotheby's, what used to be over in East 80-something Street. They were going for $10 each, and I called them up to tell them that they could have them for $10 or $15 each, period chairs, which they bought. And it's so, wow, yeah, they have those chairs. And it's so nice that they went to the house.
And Martha, you've served on a number of local and area preservation boards. As we're listening to Ben and as we're looking for the right paths forward, does this idea of community usefulness, living around these properties and interacting with them and have them serve a purpose, whether it's education, strike you as the right North Star for kind of instilling stewardship and a sense of belonging?
Oh, yes, indeed. And I think so many children are interested in history. If you just talk to some of these kids, they know they're learning history every day in school, and to be able to see it, to feel it, to experience it in person really is very helpful, I think. And the John Jay Home will have some really good educational programs, as it has had. There's a camp there. There's other things that offer information to the public. I just think it's a very valuable asset for a community.
Yeah, when I've only been there once, and people were there taking family pictures and using it sort of as if they're, they seemed very familiar.
Well, the farmers market has been there for many, many years. That has been a very nice community gathering place on Saturdays for local farmers to sell their wares. And they don't let me ride my horse through. I don't know why. Somebody got scared, thought it was scary to have a horse riding around, but I rode it anyway. There are bridle trails going through the property, which are very nice, and it's just a question of making sure that everyone in the neighborhood knows its purpose, knows what it's there for, and why we're doing this fabulous thing. It's not a danger. It's not an imposition in the neighborhood. It's just something so charming and valuable.
You mentioned school children. Linda Tarrant Reed in the film expressed the importance. It's the first thing she said, is especially for the school children. And about the Jenrette Foundation, mentorship and creating new stewards is it's big for you all.
Right.
You're constantly working on how to best invite the next generation in, right? Can you talk about what you were doing in fellowships and funding and building arts?
Absolutely. This really, and we've talked a little bit about the foundation, but if I will, Dick Jenrette founded an incredible bank with the two others, and it was really an important thing in the last century. But his side love was, of course, historic homes, decorative arts, the paintings, and the landscape. He left us with the foundation with historic landscapes as one of our mandates, right? To that, we also believe that the historic building trades and the crafts go hand in hand. You can't say that you're interested in preservation and landscapes if you're not concerned that there are not enough people who learn how to restore and do the carpentry and the masonry and so on. And another trait then that the board brought over with moving us past just having some historic sites, but into a grant maker that really wants to fund a next generation of preservationists, the board said, Dick was an incredible mentor. He always, some of our people on our board, they were, hired out of business school at DLJ, and they remember the breakfasts that they would come to where they'd sit next to partners at DLJ and chat. And then that was so important. And so we really brought that into our ethos and our mission. What we try and do is find organizations where the internships, the fellowships, the learning opportunities have dried up. A lot of them, what we find is that they had them and then COVID happened and places shut and they didn't bring them back. So we're saying like for example, Mount Vernon, right? George Washington's home. The entire foundation was crumbling. They actually had to rebuild it in the past year or so. If anyone's been there, it's extraordinary. They jacked the entire house up on steel girders, and the program that was that you had to continue visitation all while the foundation was being built. We said, when we went and heard about it, where are the students on this? Who's learning from this place? And they said, oh, well, we have expert, carpenters and masons and so on, but we hadn't really incorporated that. And we said, the kind of things that we're interested in funding is creating those opportunities. So we work closely with the American College of Building Arts in Charleston, which is extraordinary trades and wonderful school. And we help to create these internships and place them. And that's what we're looking for, those things. We've found an opportunity at Historic New England with their conservator of furniture. Again, we visited, we saw her working, and we said, who's learning from you? You're doing brilliant work. And she said, oh, we used to. So there's a Jenrette fellow there, and so on and so forth. So that's where we see our niche, and we think that Dick would appreciate it.
Yeah. The idea of learning. Martha, you said twice in the film how much you emphasized how much working in a historic building can teach you. What you can learn about history. And so I don't know where, when you think about Turkey Hill and all of the projects that you've worked on, what have some of these buildings taught you?
Well, I did restore an 1805 farmhouse in Westport, also called Turkey Hill, where I just found out that I knew he lived there, but I didn't know that he wrote Hiroshima, John Hersey, who wrote that fabulous 2-volume piece for the New Yorker magazine, in my house. It was he was a renter. He was teaching at Yale, and he lived in that house, and that's where he wrote that amazing story about the bombing of Hiroshima. And I find things in the house. When I first bought the Adams house, which is a house very similar and with a similar architect, I think, to Turkey Hill down the road on long lots in Westport. We found amazing archives of ephemera, all kinds of letters and books, and all kinds of odd antiques in the house. And much of that had to go to auction, but it was very interesting to discover. And the way the basements were built, just the way construction was conducted in those days. Where was the labor? How was it done? I have another historic house in Maine called Skylands. It was Edsel Ford's house. He built it. But how did they build a house in the middle of nowhere on the top of a mountain out of huge blocks of pink granite? Where did that come from? How did they cut it? With no machinery whatsoever.
And as you're working, so then you have to go find that out, kind of, right?
That's part of the entire process of restoration. And I think the state really is interested in preserving that kind of knowledge. And we're planning to film the entire restoration. Hopefully, we'll create a wonderful documentary of the restoration of the whole property for the public. And it's so interesting to just determine how to do this and how to do that, and which path are you going to take. It's an incredible process.
From the architecture to the people that lived there. And I would imagine, just little things that you find can kind of lead you, keep you down a path. Yeah. Yeah.
And you have to save that. I mean, it's just something to be saved and something to be treasured.
Yeah. Yeah. Ben, as we think about how important these lessons are, these lessons that the houses are teaching us, the stories that went on in them and how important they are, you spend a lot of time focused on reaching people, really kind of making sure it's a message that people, I think we all kind of know if you want to make people care, you have to tell them your story, you have to tell them a story, you have to bring them into it. The title of this is, this idea of like the civic duty. When you talk about what it means to be a good community steward and preserving our historic buildings, how do you suggest the rest of us might frame this in conversations as we talk about our communities and our nation?
Right. Well, I think actually what Martha was talking about and the approach is so important. We at the foundation believe that the process of these restorations is sometimes more important than the outcome because, right, if you document it and you share it and you use it as a way to mine for knowledge and rediscover how things were made and teach other people to do it, you must document that and you must use that. And if you just do them behind a curtain and unveil it, I always say it's like some sort of pretty bonbon, you eat it and isn't that nice? But if people had to do this, that, and the other thing, again, you're creating a kind of way of entering and way of seeing these places differently. We see our historic properties, which some people would say are historic house museums, we see them as teaching and learning laboratories for all that is restoration, preservation, decorative arts, and landscape. Of course, you can come and take a tour, but we want to make sure we are offering, how did that get restored? How are we approaching this? Hey, if we're going to work with an expert carpenter or an architect, will they participate in a student day where they actually explain their process and let people in on that? So we really see that these historic sites more and more, even if they want to just be historic homes, which is great, like Martha, I grew up going to them and, I'll drag my daughter to them too. But the idea as these kind of active laboratories, I think will really help. I think the other thing for learners and visual learners, I think it's a great challenge on the communications. Like take someone who says, I'm not a historic house person. Oh, but do you like politics? Do you like history? Hey, you know what? There's something to be learned from where John Jay ate his breakfast and what he saw and who was coming and what his day was like. And if you want to look back in history, what he was preparing to do. And these are the places that people slept, talked, it was their refuges. And so I think that when you go at it only from one angle, you have to tell this whole history, right? And you can't just only push the decorative arts. Some people will love that, but other people, they want to know the stories. They also want to know the layers of history. So if anything, these properties are these wonderful prompts to tell stories. And I think lastly, one of the things we're doing, and it's not just us, but it's a trend, it needs to happen, we're talking about them differently. We're not starting hierarchically, that just the wealthy family had the money and they commissioned all this great stuff and didn't they have a beautiful place? No. Who was enslaved there or who was an indentured servant there? What were their skills? How did they make the beautiful things and the lifestyles that were enjoyed there? And how do we actually celebrate all of that and the labor that goes into it? The labor that goes into keeping your places looking like they are. You do an incredible job documenting it, and we love watching it. And I think we've got to do that for history. So somebody doesn't only think that it's not for them. When people say it's not for them, it's because they see it's being presented to them only from one angle.
That really made an impact on me when we first talked about that, because ever since then, the visual I have is when I think of historic houses, I think of red velvet ropes, and I see those as kind of coming away a bit because of the different ways that you can experience it. When Martha's talking about roaming the property, I'm not thinking about the velvet ropes that, where everything's very precious. And this question is to both of you. Caroline McGill, the board president of the Friends of John Jay Homestead and the engine behind...
Let me bring her up here.
I think we should. I think we should. This is the engine behind all of this. So I'm going to tell everybody what you said to me. As we celebrate 250 years of American history, we are reminded we are not a country with thousands of years of history. Every chapter matters. And I thought that has resonated with me so much. And so I thought we should ask, like, what is the best advice for how we can best shape this chapter? And it's just something I definitely wanted to talk about. But anyway, Caroline, I'm probably going to mention you again. Anyway, one more round of applause, actually. So we have this chapter that we're in now, and as Ben, as you were saying, there's all kinds of prompts once you start learning about people like John Jay, that part of his legacy was civil discourse and sort of sorting out, there might be big differences, but how are we coming together on them? Because we must, we're trying to found a nation here, So when we think about this chapter, Ben, I'll start with you on this. What is your advice for how we can best shape this chapter in terms of continuing the lessons and learning from the past?
It pains me when people say, I don't like history. Well, that means they were taught by the wrong people. I mean, how can it informs our entire future. And I just, I think that, beyond the houses, just thinking about some of the thinkers, John Jay, I was talking to Ellen just before this, and I realized, I live off J Street in Brooklyn. That's named for John Jay.
I meant to put that in his intro. I made a note of it.
I had friends who went to John Jay High School, right? Okay, let's think about it. Why are these things named? Sometimes they're named for the wrong people. We also have to dig into that too, right? And maybe they shouldn't be named for those people anymore. But if I was going through the Jay Homestead now, and I'm looking at all the beautiful stuff but I also want to think, like, what were the things that he was thinking about? Well, I am no historian of that, another imposter in an area, but I was just thinking about, his Treaty of Paris and how that was about working with the British after he was such a proponent of overthrowing, right, the monarchy. And then years later, but we have to trade, we have to get along, and we have to have, so again, this is our opportunity to look, not that these histories were like these set in stones, they knew everything, they had questions and they were figuring it out. And I think we're figuring a lot out now. And the way they lived informs that. And I'll just, I want to pass to Martha, but I'll make a little plug, right? One of the fruits of this wonderful relationship between the Jenrette Foundation and the John Jay Homestead is our other friends in the room, the Katona Museum. And we are, and Grant Termos, our curator, who's in the room back there, the idea of what we would do together became, let's do an exhibition on the founding families at the time of the Revolution. What was life like at home? What were the objects they used? What were the things, the paintings they owned, and so on? So, right, again, back to this, it's not just decorative arts. It meant something, and they made choices about it, and it informed their lives. So that's our opportunity.
Thank you. There is a lot. I'm thinking about that exhibit, which is, it's like the domestic life, right? Yeah. So I have the dates for that, and we'll talk about those before we leave. Martha, as you think about how we might best shape this chapter and define it, what are your thoughts on independence of spirit, of conflict, of all of that, of how we might?
Well, it's educational programs, as I mentioned. It's going to be very important for us to let people know what did go on at that particular property. When you go to Mount Vernon, there are so many nice live reenactments that go on. The kids love those. They loved meeting Martha Washington. And then they went into the car and looked up, who's the most famous Martha? And unfortunately, the wrong answer came up. And they were so pissed off that their grandma came up. But that makes them start to think and how and just so seeing how bread was made in those days, seeing how milk was collected, all that stuff. It's going to be all these places serve a really wonderful educational purpose, and I just hope that we can have that at the John Jay House.
Yeah.
Ellen, I think there could be like the two Marthas at home that maybe Veranda does, right?
Sign us up. We're there. We're there. But I wanted tell you all a little story. This just happened in the last few days. It's about Martha. So this happened down in Birmingham, Alabama, where I am based. And so every morning, I go to a coffee shop at, me and some other psychopaths go there at 5 a.m. And we're like kind of parked out there at like 5 minutes to 5, waiting for them to open the doors. And one of this little motley crew of people is this couple. They are Scottish immigrants that came over in, 1955 or 54, and they're there every single morning, this couple. He's 94, she's 92. They've been married for 70 years. We had their 70th anniversary party at 5 o'clock in the morning in the coffee shop with bagpipes, made everyone want to run out screaming. As you can imagine, they were world travelers. They do everything together, and now that they can't really travel, his eyesight is not good. The reason they go there every morning at 5 a.m. is, they said, to stay healthy. We can't do a lot of other stuff at this point, but we need to be out in the world, and we need to be interacting. And so they've created a great community at this coffee shop that I happened into. And so now they kind of live vicariously through our adventures. And so I'll move this along here. So I was telling them where I was going. And he's an engineer. He was an engineer in his working life. And so I tell them where I'm going, and Agnes says, "Aha, Martha Stewart, yes, fascinating." And he kind of sat back and he said, "I always liked her." And that wouldn't be groundbreaking. That's why everyone here is here today. They like Martha.
No, John Jay. They like John Jay.
They like John Jay. But the reason it was groundbreaking is because she didn't know it. The wife didn't know it. They've been married for 70 years. They do everything together. And she kind of said, "You do? We've never spoken about this, And so he kind of, and he never rattles. He never rattles. And I'm watching all of this, and she's like, "Well, what is it? What?" And he said, "Well, I've just always liked her." And she said, "Well, tell me more, And he said, "She can make a lot of things." And I thought that is such an OG answer, for what you've done. And I thought, how lucky are we? We just sat here and talked about the way forward for the John Jay Homestead, and from both of you. And I thought, because then he elaborated. He said, "And she makes them work." And he's an engineer, so that matters to him, And so I thought that's such an, that brings it down to the essence. And I thought, they know this can work. They're ready to go. And how lucky are we that they just told us all, kind of, whether it's about John Jay or other historic buildings, how we can go and make these things work. And so anyway, I just wanted to share that story from the coffee shop at 5 a.m. Before we open it up to questions, I wanted to say, become a friend of the John Jay Homestead. The very minimum, go to the grounds in the spring, take a picnic, not this weekend. The exhibit that Ben was talking about is the Domestic Life of the Founding Fathers exhibit at the Katona Museum of Art, June 28th through October 4th. So keep an eye out for that. Would you say the best way is just kind of checking with the museum?
Yeah,
just kind
go to the Katona Museum website and our website, yeah.
And I want to thank you again, Caroline McGill, for being the engine behind all of this. I am so glad to know you. Thank you to Martha, and thank you, Ben. You lit up our night and, our vision for the future of the homestead. And so it's just been so wonderful to have you up here and share your insights. So if anyone has any questions that you'd like to ask, we can open it up for now, and it can be about the John Jay Homestead. It can be about coffee shops. It can be about whatever.
Taking the theme of domesticity a bit further, any culinary history, what was grown on the farm, how the family sustained itself, and what they might have served at a banquet.
Well, we're doing all that research now, and I think we'll find out. There probably were no really great cherry trees, maybe some sour cherry trees, but not sweet cherries. Definitely apples.
Yes, lots to do with apples.
Of all the fantastic houses that have been restored, historic houses that you've been in, from Monticello to Mount Vernon to John Jay Homestead to Skylands, the idea that, are any of them haunted by...
Love this question.
By the original residents?
I had a haunted room in one of my houses. The oldest house on Lily Pond Lane I bought in about 1980 something. And there was on the third floor, there was a raised platform with a cage around it. And people got the shivers when they went up to look at that space. And I always imagined what went on in that cage. It's horrible. We left it because it was part of the house.
So actually, some of my team is here and they know more about it. I've deliberately not asked about the haunted stories because I know that there are some and there are people who have died in them. But, that happens and it used to happen a lot. But one house near where I have a house upstate, it's an old stone house. It's not a historic house museum, but it's pre-Revolutionary War, and the revolution did come through that area of like Kingston, New York, and I met the guy who's just bought it, who's actually a preservationist, and he's restoring it. And I said, my mom knew the people who lived there, and they said that at night, well, I don't know how they knew Revolutionary War soldiers, but they would walk up and down the stairs. They'd hear them walking up and down the stairs. He said, "Are you crazy? The stairs creak by themselves at night." So, a little tingle shiver. There are friends, these old houses.
I have to say, too, you all deserve a better moderator. That should have been on my list of questions. That was great.
Ben, you've talked a lot about the work that you've done with interns, and I wonder if you can maybe elucidate for people how so much of the work that you're doing is with professions and study areas that are just dwindling. And Martha, for you, one of the things I think that's been so great, putting the Jay House aside, is that you've made historic houses comfortable for people and to fall in love with them. And can you talk maybe a little bit about that process?
We really do care about the interior decoration of a house. We do care that there is comfort, even though I don't have a comfortable couch in any of my houses. And I am maligned by my grandchildren all the time for the impracticality of my furnishings. And that's how they talk. This is a very impractical TV room. The upholstery is white. But we've worked very hard on that over the last 50 years of trying to make a house a home. That's the whole idea of what my business has been. It's called living, and living should be comfortable and reasonable and enjoyable, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for noticing that.
Great question, Howard, and thanks for teeing us up. If you don't know Howard Czar, he has made Lyndhurst into an amazing place, and it merits a visit. And Howard is wise because we owe him an internship. When you speak to people, and probably a lot of you are old house people in here, hey, we got to get the great carpenter to restore. Well, that carpenter is a guy who's probably, if you're lucky, in his 70s, and there's nobody else. And so what are we doing? And yet we have a nation now that's saying we want more than, the standard education. We want to learn about things. This is a huge opportunity for you all in the room who care about old things to say, the next generation needs to learn these traits and skills. They are art. They are lucrative now. It's not the poor carpenter. It's not the poor mason. These are really sought after skills. And so we at the foundation are, as Howard pointed out, right, we are looking to create these internships because, again, if we say young people don't care, but we've never created moments for them to have meaningful experiences, and you're right, it starts with the education with the kids, but then it has to be like, hey, I want to do an internship. I want to help out. Well, these places need to have those opportunities. And they can be in the trades. They can be in all kinds of things. And so I think that this is really, that's my call out. This is the frontier for us to say, it's more than just the pretty things. It's the art of how they're done and who and where can they learn how to do them. And we are doing this through funding internships, fellowships, but we're also doing several studies that look into the state of the education in America that you can get. We just did a report on our website that you can find, the state of historic preservation education in America, asking, are people learning what they need to learn? Do they have the skills? Are the jobs there? We're going to do one on historic landscapes and cultural landscapes in June at Edgewater. And then we're going to finish one on the state of historic building trades and craft. And we're working with a few entities to do some studies on what are the needs. And we've done these from everywhere from the kind of Mississippi, Louisiana area to now New York State and beyond. And yeah, I think that's what we have to do to save these things, get people the skills and help them help us repair them.
It was so proactive to look for the gaps. When you were telling me about those studies, I just was so interested in that. And, also anybody who is interested, please pay a visit to the American College of the Building Arts in Charleston. I feel like Charleston has been leading the way in a lot of these crafts, the historic crafts. Even before that opened, they were, I was there for a while before I moved to Birmingham, working at the magazine, a magazine there. And, the stories on just the people, the very specialized people who would do the plaster work to restore the mantelpieces and the ceiling medallions and all of that. There were already had several of them there that wasn't, highly specialized, and there were only 2 or 3, but you could find them.
And I just want to add about the American College of Building Arts. The greatest things come out of necessity. Why was it founded? It was founded after Hurricane Hugo came through Charleston, destroyed these historic American buildings, and they had to bring the people in from France and Italy to repair them because there was no one in America. And so, how wonderfully proactive to create a school that's born out of that, to say, we don't want to find ourselves in this situation. So, yeah.
Where do you go from learning that this stuff is out there? How do they use this to get to you guys? What are some of the sites? How do they start Googling? What are they looking for exactly?
Well,
to get involved.
So, I'm like an old man, so I say website, and then anyone under, 40 is rolling their eyes, probably under 50. Social media, right? That's another thing we could talk all about. And again, Martha, you have a ton to teach us on this. These historic sites and houses, they need to get on these platforms and just show what they're doing, do fun things, right? It doesn't all have to be this super top down, right? So, we've got to get on social media. We've got to do events and things that are not that are a little light touch sometimes, right? That's the point of entry thing. Sometimes you have a good time doing something somewhere and you're like, hey, I want to come back and actually learn about it. So I think, right, we have a lot of tools at our disposal, but we also, it takes a little more energy now. And I think that we all have to think about that and how we make the things accessible.
So what do we have to remember of John Jay's life? What are the main lessons of his life, or what are the main things we want to remember today?
One, he wrote the Federalist Papers. Yeah. He wrote the Declaration of Independence for New York State. He owned slaves, and he emancipated slaves in New York. And I'm sure he had many second thoughts about the ownership portion of his life as a result. And he was a very close ally and friend and colleague of Washington's. He had a very interesting life.
I think
Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of New York.
A diplomat in Spain and France. I think that there are plenty of positive things from what my little understanding, right? He wasn't a grandstander. He was someone everyone wanted in the room because he was a deep thinker, and he was a critical thinker, and he was a diplomat, and so he was really a partner. And he had his frustrations, right? He ran for president. He tried, but he didn't get it. I'll just end with that. He also, back to the homestead, he knew when to step away. When he retired to that property, and he was baited many times to get back into politics. And he said, you know what? There's time for more people. My time is done, and I'm gonna stay here. I'm gonna get my hands in the dirt, and I'm gonna do that. And I think that that's also wise.
Ben, I think if you're still with the foundation in 10 years, you're going to have to turn young people away, as AI eliminates the need for much of the higher education because their jobs are being replaced. There'll be a large reversion back to skilled trades. And I suspect that the historic skilled trades will take on a new panache.
Thank you. William is very insightful in that. We should have gotten to AI, right? But that's a great point because, right, we all have to lean into the facts that the hands-on things are something. Sure, you can wear your virtual masks and have things, but getting your hands in dirt or getting splinters because you're or getting your finger mashed because you work in masonry. These are things that I don't think AIA can, and we can offer that, right, at our sites and our experiences. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we do another round of applause for our guests here, Martha and Ben? Thank you so much.